supposed to be recording right now. And okay, quiz on best programming practices. Everyone can see my shared screen on the first question. What mistake is present in the sequence of comments? Can you see this? Okay, excellent. So here the good answer was answer B. Tom, do you want to comment on this?
Sure. Well, you can actually do this from process of elimination, because we actually did have a source with a wildcard in the script that we handed out. DUNE TPC is on top of Larsoft in the software dependency tree, if you looked at it from the first session. And yes, we release every week, meaning that this release that we tested on for the tutorial is now a week old and a new one has come out. So if you check out the head of develop and last week's setup products, you will get a version mismatch. And that's the correct answer.
Thank you. Okay, question number 2. How do you fix the mistake in question 1? And the correct answer is answer D. Everything suggested in answers A, B, and C are valid. Tom, a couple of words on this?
Yeah, so when you do a git clone of the remote repository, that is get the, in this case, it's DUNE TPC, you get a copy of the remote repository, which means you get all the version tags too. So if you have set up or checked out the wrong version, it's easy to check out the right version with a git command. Git checkout actually doesn't talk to the remote repository. It just takes your local repository and switches it to the version that you specify with the tag. So that version matches the version of Larsoft that we had set up in question 1. And all of these other things are essentially equivalent to that.
Great, thank you. Question number 3. What is the output of this sequence of C++ statements? Size t equals 5, size t b equals 6, and then standard C out, a minus b, and then standard C out. And was it A, B, C, or D? The correct answer is C. And I think people are curious to know why, Tom.
Well, what I probably should have done during the tutorial is show yet another dirty trick. So dirty tricks are just tricks. They're not actually dirty. Well, this one's dirty because it involves a C interpreter that's built into root. So if you want to test some commands like this, you can actually just cut and paste those lines and put them at the root prompt and see what you get. And it would print out this big long number, which is C, the answer for C. And the reason for that is that A and B are unsigned 64-bit integers. So that's what size t is, 64-bit unsigned integer. When you subtract 2 unsigned integers, you get an unsigned integer. And unsigned integers are always positive. So the arithmetic that happens on the CPU is signed, and it will put 64 ones in a row to represent -1, but interpreted as an unsigned integer, it's 2 to the 64 minus 1, which is this number in decimal. And actually, I was just Googling this last night. It turns out that if you have an if statement with a test to see if this number is equal to -1, it'll say, yeah, that's equal to -1.
Yeah, I suggest to Google this number and you will learn even more about this. And don't use it as a password because it's an obviously very specific number. So that will not be safe. Okay, so that's the explanation behind it. Sign versus unsigned integers. Thank you, Tom. Then what is a segmentation fault? So if you have followed today's tutorial, you will see that the correct answer is answer A, the results of an invalid memory access. Has this been covered? I will go right to the next question for saving a bit of time. Question number 5. Which of these is a good command line utility to monitor the CPU and memory usage of running interactive processes? And here the correct answer is answer A. Tom, do you want to talk a bit on be on top of things?
Right. So top is mostly there to sort things by the top usage. So it's meant to show you who's using CPU on the computer. So it's sorted by the instantaneous CPU usage. I had a top running yesterday in one of the tutorials. You can get it to sort based on total time or memory or a few other things. It has some command line options, and also some keys are hot. You press Q to quit out of it. And mostly I just run it. There are variations. There's one called HTOP, which will separate it out by CPU if you've got a multi-CPU computer. And the rest are just there for fun. Bottom, of course, we're all physicists. I was going to put charm and strange in there, but I figured I'd put some computing things there instead. Chmod changes the access permissions for a file. IFDH copies files and does file access on remote systems or even local systems. That's a data handling command.
We covered this in the first day of the tutorial. Thank you, Tom.
Right.
Question number 6. You're logged into one of the DUNE GPVM machines at Fermilab, but you get permission denied messages when trying to access files in your home directory. What's most likely wrong? A, your CI logon certificate has expired. B, your CI logon certificate has the wrong username. C, you haven't gotten your grid proxy yet. D, your Kerberos ticket is missing or expired. What was the correct answer? It was actually the answer D. Tom?
Yes, so the NAS home directories, your home directories on the GPVMs, require Kerberos tickets to access, and they have lifetimes of 26 hours. So you have to either push a new one by logging in or use K5 push to refresh it. CI logon is used for grid access, but not your home directories. And it really should be impossible to get someone else's CI logon certificate, because then you'd be impersonating someone else. But hardly anyone said that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Question number 7. You want to store a list of hit ID numbers so you can process them later in your program. Which of these is the best choice? And the correct answer is D. Use standard vector size t in order to let the list grow. You covered this, Tom, but any other comments about this?
Not really. That first one is the Fortran way of doing things. It's actually easy to do it in C++ as well. But it's easy to run off the end of a fixed size array. And it's even if you check to make sure that your problem fits in the array size that you've declared, there'll be some problems that'll be too big, and then you have to decide what to do. So use D.
Okay, standard vector is your friend. It's very convenient.
Right.
Question 8. You're reading in a data file and notice that the kinetic energy of a particle is recorded as -999 GeV. What is that? And here, a lot of people got it right. This is, of course, answer A. Couple of words, Tom?
I had a little chat with in the breakout room about guard values. It turns out that we use them a lot in particle physics, and I don't know how common they are outside of our field of expertise, but they're not very safe in that some people put 0 in or -9999 or various other things. And if you're checking for a guard value to skip around it and make sure that your calculation is correct and not adding in crazy numbers, you may miss some if they're not the ones you expect. So we were thinking that maybe if you're reading things off of a file, the classes that describe the contents of that should come with a method that says whether or not something's a guard value or not, because then it would be unambiguous. We had some cases where a single number in a field could have 2 or more different guard values depending on who was filling it, and had problems with missing or invalid information. And you have to test for all these different guard values. And that's clumsy and unsafe. But -999 is a very typical one that you'll see.
Not ideal, but a good compromise at times to be able to have numbers in all of our variables. Okay, right. Now you know.
The alternative is to save a valid bit for everything, and that would almost double our storage requirements. because bools are stored as 64-bit integers on our computers.
Okay. So now you know that minus 999 is not a physics value. This is a placeholder. Question 9. You're reading in a data file and notice that the kinetic energy of a particle is recorded as 5.23 to the power of 212 GeV. What is a likely explanation? So this is not a guard value anymore. The likely explanation is answer C. You may have a memory overwrite. Tom, let us know more about this, please.
Yeah, those are the only situations where I've seen numbers like this, is when, say, you put an integer into a piece of memory that's interpreted as a floating point number, then the exponent can get crazy stuff that's otherwise very hard to get. Sometimes you get lucky. Often memory overwrites are sensible, so the number would be 0 or something that actually looks like an energy. It'd just be wrong. And those are the hardest to debug. Numbers like this are pretty obvious. They stand out. And every now and then I would hear things in working group meetings where someone says, oh, I got an absurd energy for a particular particle, where absurd means that the entire universe would collapse if there was ever a particle with this energy in it.
Yeah, let's not have the entire universe collapse. Okay, so now you know how to debug your program if you encounter such an enormous number. Last but not least, which of the following are examples of defensing programming? It's good to have a nice defense. And here the correct answer was actually everything from A to C. Tom, your last words on this?
Oh, yeah, sure. We had another one where copying code from the web and pasting it into your program was not recommended as defensive programming, but these are all defensive. In fact, it's good to check your inputs. It makes your program a little teeny tiny bit slower to make sure that you validate everything. But given that we spend all of our time doing I/O and actual computation, it actually is almost no overhead at all to check for error codes and actually do the right thing in case something wrong happens. And that your colleagues will thank you. It's not just you. And sometimes when people are programming, they say, well, I'll never put bad input into my program. Why should I spend the extra effort to check for null pointers and bad return status? But often, since we live in a big collaboration on DUNE with over 1,000 people, we hand our code off to other people, and students write code and it's barely works for the purpose that they need it to work. And then they give it to the next student, and the next student exercises it just barely outside of its domain of applicability, and everything crashes. So make your programs bulletproof if you can.
I don't know if you did it on purpose, but bulletproof is perhaps the best way to understand, to finalize our quiz. That is the matrix theme. Be like Neo. Avoid the bullets. Okay, great. Right. If you enjoyed it, please thumbs up and upload. I am going to stop the recording right now.